Back in the early days of Adult Swim, there was one show that I made sure I stayed up as late as I could in order to watch it. The one that had the barren desert landscape reflective of the Old West, but with that special flair of science fiction creating a strange and unique world of saloons, booze, gunfights, and absolute chaos. And in the middle of all of it was a lone wanderer in a red coat, decked out with his spiked-up blonde hair, circular shades, and custom silver gun. He was known as Vash the Stampede, a humanoid typhoon that was worth $60 billion double dollars in bounty, a figure that within this fictional world was supposedly the cause of an untold amount of devastation, not the least of which was wiping an entire city off the map in one fell swoop. How could he have the power to do this, and what kind of man could he possibly turn out to be? And real quick, before I get into the review, I do want to shout out a Patreon supporter of mine, ES Fiend, and his book called A Dream of Waking Life, which is available now. It's a philosophical and psychological thriller that tells the story of one man's journey through space, time, and mind to not only discover his true identity, but also the love of his life. A woman who keeps slipping through his fingers and into an alternate reality. It's a thought-provoking meditation on the thin line between what is real and what is not. A Dream of Waking Life leaves readers questioning how far they would go to understand the nature of their own existence and how much they would sacrifice for love. The book is available right now on Amazon, only $4.99, and is definitely a good read for anyone interested in the more existential style of storytelling. Also, I have included some links below to the website for his books and the Instagram page so you can follow and show your support. Definitely go check it out, give it a read, send some love, and tell him Ryan sent you. So, the subversion of expectations in TRIGUN is told within the very first episode, when it is revealed that Vash the Stampede is kind of a fucking dork. The setup for the intense, brutal Kenshiro-type figure is replaced by a guy making goofy faces, panically running around from bullets, and makes it known that he despises violence. Oh, and of course we must add in the fact that he is an absolute sucker for anybody with a pretty face. He's a man that says he's trying to create a world of love and peace. A man that tries to talk his way out of any situation, and if he can avoid it at all costs, not draw his weapon. In fact, it's not even until episode 5 that Vash actually fires his gun for the first time in the series. Now, TRIGUN only has 26 episodes in total, and I consider it to be one of the three holy trinity of 90s sci-fi western anime, right up there next to Cowboy Bebop and Outlaw Star. And though I don't personally think TRIGUN is quite on the level as the other two, I still look at the show very fondly and remember a time where it really spoke to me. Recently, I just rewatched it for the first time in probably over a decade, and it's funny how most of what I remember is actually from the final 10 episodes, because a lot happens within that portion narratively, including a lot of tragedy, which I always constantly find myself drawn to with storytelling. I'm told that the TRIGUN manga is very similar to this portion of the anime, but truth be told, I have not read it. I do plan to read it at some point, but for now, all I have to go on is the anime, and so that's what I'll be talking about here, as spoiler-free as I can. The structure of the anime is very interesting because it is only 26 episodes in total, but the first half is extremely wacky at times and really plays up the humor and juxtaposition of what we assume Vash to be against what he actually is. Almost to the point that if you didn't know any better, you may as well just say that the whole series is a comedy. But this actually makes something very interesting happen. It's one of those experiences where you get a preconceived notion about what the show is that lures you into this false sense of security. You expect Vash to use his wacky anime plot armor to just get out of any situation without causing harm and without anybody dying. Things get sillier and sillier, and it seems as if the persona of Vash that humanity en masse thinks that he is all just part of the joke. But I remember one episode extremely vividly from when I first watched it as a kid, and still it stood out to me on the rewatch. It's episode 12 called Diablo. It's the first sense of a shift in tone and introduces one of the major antagonists, Legato, and the concept of a group of highly skilled assassins out there in the world that have it out for Vash in a big way. For the first time since the start of the series, Vash is up against a serious opponent. This huge guy named Manav who looks like Bane and is equipped with a large amount of firepower and does not care at all who gets caught in his way. Vash desperately tries to deal with the confrontation without harming anybody else, but things don't go as well as he had hoped. It's the first time that we see Vash fighting seriously, and the first time he is on the brink of killing somebody himself. But he doesn't. Then there's this very somber sequence of him walking away, and you start to put a few pieces of the puzzle together. Just who and what is Vash? He's clearly more powerful than the average human, and it seems as though he is desperately running from something. Not necessarily the enemies that he's facing, but from a past that's weighing him down. Something he doesn't want to face. Alongside the fact that even if he wishes to not cause that devastation and death, it inevitably does happen wherever he goes. And just the same way that he can't seem to outrun the past, he also can't stop all of these bad things from happening. You start to realize that the fun, goofy Vash is a persona of who he wants to be and what he wants the world to be like. This false reality that he paints and tries over and over again to make happen, but he's constantly forced into these dangerous situations, all the while trying to make the silly Vash shine forward and be that prevailing force. And that's the test of it all. This battle back and forth between the past that holds you back and the future that you want to create, but in the middle is this present-day gray zone that is so dependent on each individual situation that sometimes you just break. Having the first half of the anime be more lighthearted and silly, somehow in a strange way, actually makes the second half feel that much more tragic. Vash's history is only explained in very vague details and hints up until episode 18, where we get an entire episode dedicated to a flashback of his childhood and how humanity arrived in its current situation. I don't want to spoil much in this video in case you haven't seen it, but from the get-go you are aware that the setting of the show is not on planet Earth. This planet is where humanity ended up after traveling through space to find a new home. The Western setting is only a result of where humans are at the time culturally after reforming on a new world. Vash himself is connected to the beginning of this world and, of course, from a traumatic event that helped propel his current worldview. From the woman that raised him and taught him the value of life and how nobody has the right to take the life of another person. How her favorite flower was red, which Vash represents with his coat, and from the idea of peace that is hopefully achievable someday. TRIGUN has a pretty small but tightly written cast. Besides Vash himself, there are two women that wind up following him on their own journey of finding this legendary outlaw and trying to discern just how destructive he actually is. Meryl and Millie are great characters on their own, but early on they also provide that window for the audience. They go into it expecting Vash to be one way and slowly realize he's the exact opposite of a vicious killer that he's been presented as. Actually, it takes multiple episodes for them to even believe he actually is Vash. And then we have Nicholas D. Wolfwood, probably one of the coolest names in the series and also the coolest weapon. The man carries around a gigantic cross on his back, which opens up to reveal an arsenal of guns and is also a giant machine gun and rocket launcher within itself. The amount of strength it would take to carry that around, well, we just kind of ignore that because he is a regular human, but he's also a man of God. One that still does value the innocence like that within children, but is also much more pragmatic than Vash in that he is more likely to shoot first than to just wait for somebody to shoot him. Unlike Vash, Wolfwood understands that pacifism goes too far sometimes and people end up getting hurt. Both of them want the best for those around them, but they go about it in conflicting ways. But the funny thing about it is that flip within the traditional narrative of a man finding forgiveness and finding God. This injection of peace and morality is coming from an extremely powerful force that wears red and has a reputation for destruction. Something like maybe the devil? Well, at least from word of mouth. But instead of leading Wolfwood into temptation, Vash begins to influence him with the idealism that there is a better way, sort of incorporating this loss of faith within Wolfwood's character. Suddenly he's seeing that there is still hope and that it's coming from the most unlikely of sources. But one of the things the show does very well is to push this pacifism mentality as far as it can and see if it can hold up within dire situations. Even though Vash's influence helps Wolfwood in development and with a reconnection with what he believes in, there is also some dire consequences. As well, Vash does tend to luck out in many cases, but there's also a moment with Legato in an episode very near the end of the series where Vash is forced to make an extreme decision, to the point where you realize the answers are often that there are no perfect answers. Sometimes we are forced to make horrible decisions. Sometimes we can make all the right moves and still be punished. Sometimes an ideal is nothing more than that, just an idea. There is an extremism that runs between both Vash and the primary antagonists of the series that conflict with one another without allowing the option for middle ground. An analogy used in the flashback episode is when a butterfly is stuck in a spider's web. Saving the butterfly means the spider will starve, and for the spider to live, the butterfly must die. So what is the right thing to do? How do you save both? That's the struggle and the idea behind what Vash is all about. It's about the how. Maybe it's best to let nature take its course, and whoever lives is just whoever lives, but Vash has power and ability, and he chooses to use that in a metaphorical way to try to save both. Vash takes on the burdens of the butterfly while also being able to attack like the spider. Maybe going back to Wolfwood, if you wanted to look at it in a biblical way, Vash is sort of like Jesus taking on the burdens of others on himself. He will face the consequences for others because he can. Vash could blow everyone away with his skills as a gunslinger, but instead he puts himself through hell in order to just save one life. He will strip naked and bark like a dog, embarrassing and humiliating himself if it means that somebody gets to live. The important thing is that Vash is tested. There's a big moral component presented in the show, but it doesn't really try to shove it down your throat so much as just show you what someone with Vash's ideas would do in these different situations. The temptations, the pain, the broken hearts. Can he maintain who he is even when making mistakes? Can he still believe in himself? Can he still ask for forgiveness? And can any of us ask for forgiveness? In a series that begins so wacky and comedic, the levels of depth that it does eventually get to, I think, are kind of the point. We all have the capacity for darkness, just as we all have it for love and peace. Vash is that love and peace personified. A love and peace that carries a really big gun, knows how to use it, but chooses not to if he can avoid it. And maybe if he can be the example in practice, even if everyone believes him to be something else, he can truly make a difference, one person at a time.